Okay, well, for people who are watching on the live stream, this is a internal language development meeting about Wolfram Language. We hold many of these. This is a collection of different topics that we have today. Let's start going through them. So, first one is about coefficient rules and Laurent polynomials. Okay.
Yes. So here the point is that some of our functions to get coefficients are able to deal with negative powers, but others do not. And Eric suggested that we extend coefficient rules to handle also negative powers.
What does coefficient rules do right now with negative powers? Just ignores them?
Basically, it gets totally confused because you see there it's saying at zero order or zero power, it assigns everything as being independent of x.
That seems kind of stupid. So coefficient list itself, if I just do coefficient list, so if I have that polynomial there, and I say coefficient list.
Coefficient list is one function, this is discussed further down, that cannot handle negative because it's
because it isn't a polynomial.
Yes, so because the output is the coefficients at order at power 0, 1, 2, 3. This cannot be extended to the negatives because then the list is not properly positioned.
Okay.
So coefficient list and coefficient arrays, I think there is no hope of extending them. But coefficient rules, because it has on the left-hand side of the rules the power, then it could be extended.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, we could do something like what array does. Oh, I see. Here we have the dimensions truncating or padding with zeros. Gives an array of those dimensions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So similar to array itself, right, which has an origin point, right? If I look at array, well, let's see. This is coefficient arrays, right? Is the other case here?
Yes.
Okay. So one could certainly imagine, just like with array itself, that there's an origin, an index origin that you can specify, right?
Right. Good point. Yeah, we could do that.
I don't know whether it's particularly useful. I mean, it might be useful because right now these are zero origin arrays, right? Because if I do a coefficient arrays of something that has, yeah, okay. I mean, go ahead.
Yes, this first array that you see in the example of coefficient arrays would be the array of constants. Yeah. So yes, with that additional argument, we could extend this.
I mean, I don't know how much we care, but where does it say that's not a polynomial? That seems like it should be a polynomial.
Perhaps if you put it inside expand.
I don't need one to. It's not supposed to be necessary, right? It's supposed to do the computation whether or not it has.
Yeah.
What the heck is this?
Yes. So this is the notation. So coefficient arrays is more for the multivariable case.
Yeah.
In this case, it's still considering that it's an array, so it's arrays of dimension 1. To see the dimensions of it.
All right. Look, my point of view here, this is hardly the most critical thing. If we can get coefficient rules to work, fine. I don't see any reason not to make it work. So what it's doing here is it's with respect to the list of variables here. So each one of these it's a sparse thing where each one of those will just be the exponent list.
Exactly.
For a given monomial. Seems fine to me. I mean, coefficient rules case seems fine. The coefficient list case seems like yeah, I mean that's sort of interesting. This padding or whatever. I think this is in the tail of what anybody might care about. But as I say, because this is starting with power 0. Oh, I see. So that goes. So the first element is So it's the opposite way around from digits, so to speak. So coefficientless
Exactly.
is the opposite way around from integer digits.
Yeah.
Do we say that, by the way, in here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Good. Okay. Seems reasonable to me. Now, in terms of coefficient arrays, I just don't think we should worry about that right now.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to have one function that is able to do the right thing.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. So another small thing, a suggestion of having our timing functions producing quantities.
Yes.
Yeah, this is something that is requested periodically, and some of our, like ping time now returns a quantity.
Right.
So,
I mean, right.
So the question is whether this deserves a new function or whether we can add a second argument in timing and absolute timing to handle this, for example.
Yes. Well, what do we think? I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the way that timing works. I mean, in other words, I don't know how to do this so that I get a reasonable time here. Okay. I mean, the fact that this is coming back as, first element, second element thing is hardly my absolute favorite, but I don't see a lot of choice. I mean, if I said here, repeated timing, is repeated timing using quantities or not?
No. It's following time.
Okay. And there's no second argument to timing, right?
Not now, but to repeated timing, perhaps, because we have discussed in the past the possibility of specifying some statistical arguments there.
At least t seconds. So we've already got that. Humph. Okay. So the issue is, your question is there a way to I mean, it's a shame we can't do this, but okay, so what are the possibilities? One possibility is to simply change these to return quantities. My guess is that's a bad idea.
Yes, we could break too many things. But adding a second argument, I think it could be safe.
Yeah, but that won't work because repeated timing can't have a second argument. It's already got a timeout argument.
Well, perhaps it can be a third argument here.
By the way, I mean, does time constrained take?
It does take quantities. Yeah,
it takes quantities.
Make all the timing functions allow consumption of quantities, but we've tried not to generate them from a lot of the functions that have been around for a long time, just because there's so much potential for problem in legacy code that's checking, absolute timing is less than 4 is going to be problematic if it returns a quantity of seconds.
All right, so what we've got right now is a cluster of 3 timing functions: timing, absolute timing, and repeated timing. So one possibility would be to have a new function that perhaps wraps together all of those. I don't know. I mean, the distinction between timing and absolute timing is quite useful.
Indeed.
And widely used.
Yeah.
What would we want, in a perfect world, what would the timing functions return? Would it be these pairs or would it be something different? I mean, or would it be that instead we want some super function that is, something like evaluation report of Expa, returning something that says, CPU timing, absolute timing, memory used, result. That seems like it might be a useful thing. So that then, I mean, that's the question, is whether that would be now how does that relate to evaluation data, which is used in, how does that relate to this? Oh, well, maybe we've already got this answer. Okay, that's kind of annoying. That would be let's see. Evaluation data. So why does one not use evaluation data? And by the way, why on earth is evaluation data coming back with timings, not with quantities?
I don't know.
Okay. That's interesting. What is output log, do you think?
No idea. I must admit I've never used this function yet.
Right. Well, this function is used in web calls, right? It's used in the API mechanism for that. This is what populates the JSON response data for an API call. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think we should consider, again, we have to look at how that flows through response form. Maybe you can talk to the folks who deal with this, okay, and see whether we can change these to have quantities right now, whether that would be okay. And if so, or whether that will just produce a disaster. And if we can just concentrate on, by the way, this is very weird that that's a colon greater than thing, but that we can concentrate on something like this, evaluation data or evaluation report. I mean, if it's a report like that, one could even imagine a data set format of the thing. Right? In other words, if you care more about the details of what happened than you care about the actual result itself, this might be a nice form. The other possibility would be, I mean, the question is, how does one use this? Does one just want the timing information, right?
I think Arnaud was going in that direction because he was interested, for example, in specifying the unit he wanted. While I think specifying a unit in the arguments of evaluation data would be an overkill. So from evaluation data, we would expect that the function chooses a correct unit.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, but the issue here is, look, the basic problem is that timing doesn't just give you the timing. It gives you this pair, which is the time and the result.
Mm-hmm. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's often useful. I mean, but sometimes you just want the timing and you end up saying first of timing.
Right, yes, that's very common.
All right, look, I think the thing we need to do is understand how this response form stuff works and consider this evaluation data possibility. I think that okay, so what are the branches here? One branch is, we got these three functions: timing, absolute timing, repeated timing, right?
Yep.
The second argument possibility is not great. Well, I mean, it is doable because repeated timing, if it took a string as second argument, that can disambiguate relative to having an actual quantity in the second argument. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
It won't work if you do control equals milliseconds, because what will then happen is that will turn into 1 millisecond, I think.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
Right? So, okay, so the possibilities are a unit specification in the second argument with the possibility of timing blah, 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 comma, automatic, for example, meaning use the sensible unit. Not crazy. And the way that this would look otherwise is timing blah, 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 comma, seconds would give the timing in seconds. Now, would it give it as a quantity with seconds? Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Well, okay, so look, that is a simple thing. I think the other thing is to change evaluation data to return things with quantities here. I think it would also be useful to do a survey of all functions that take Nick, you said that you've dealt with all functions that take times as inputs and made them support quantities. Is that right?
Yeah, we did a scan through. We ended up missing one or two, but we've patched those up since then, so they should all. The first focus.
Do you know which functions return times, though?
There are not an enormous number of them, so there are various import formats that will pre-generate quantities or various data functions that will spit out quantities. I don't know of many. These are basically the evaluation timing functions, and they currently don't return quantities.
Okay. Well, so wait a second. Which don't return? These ones here don't return quantities.
These ones don't return quantities. Again, the initial consideration being we want to make sure everything consumes stuff before we start producing it in a lot of places.
All right. So my tendency is to say this is a reasonable approach. The second argument approach is a reasonable approach. I think we should consider redoing evaluation data to change that to be quantities. But I would like you to go understand how response form uses it. Make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right, onward.
Okay, so this is a suggestion from myself. So I use a lot this combination, which is I want to find all Wolfram language symbols which have some given option or attribute. And then I always have to write this combination of functions. So I would really like to have something simpler.
Okay, so you're suggesting something that is in Wolfram language data that is some kind of entity class. What's that?
Either something new there or a given new function. So Eric was suggesting, for example, or was saying that for some data functions, we have a lookup function. So I wonder whether a Wolfram language lookup or...
Well, we have that for the Wikipedia data. No, do we? We don't really.
We have it for formula data. We have formula lookup, but that's generally looking up standard names for things.
So something that will be as simple as options goes to geoprojection and gives me the symbols with geoprojection. I think this would help in
right, but I mean, isn't that consistent with... Okay, so there's an entity specified there. So if I say Wolfram language data, I mean, if I was simply saying option... Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, something like this, option arrow, nearest, I don't know what, feature extractor. Is that the kind of thing you want?
Yes, for example.
I mean, what you're saying is that if I say Wolfram language data of quotes options, what that's right now going to do is give the entity associated with options, right?
Exactly.
So the issue here is, can you give a list of entities that have certain features? I mean, I could imagine something where you would say, show me the see alsos of such and such a thing. Now you can presumably get the see alsos by saying here, how does this work? Does this say see also? How do I get the see alsos?
It's possible to do it. I don't know.
Related symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Why did that take so long? Okay.
So Wolfram language data is super powerful. It has lots of information. It's just that sometimes it's a bit difficult to get something simple out of it.
So look, one possibility is to have another property name. And is anybody who's worked on Wolfram language data here?
Unfortunately, no. I told Eric, but he couldn't come, apparently.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of like... Yeah, okay. I mean, it seems... Okay, so there are two possibilities. One is some kind of notation that would have Wolfram language data return a list here. Mm-hmm. I think it's more natural to have, given the name of an option, like if we ask for Wolfram language data of feature extractor, for example, what you said there, which is functions that have that option.
I see. Yeah, I like that very much.
Okay, fine. But then, so then what would we call that property?
Option symbols with option.
Let's see what some of these are. Common option values. Okay, so yeah, I mean, symbols with option, I guess. Symbols having option. It's a little bit funky, isn't it? Because
yeah, it's a property that only works for some.
Well, no, it'll just give a null list. Option. What should we need to say? We also need the same thing for attributes.
Right.
So here we have things like, okay. By the way, we really do need to know why that was slow. And I have a bad feeling it had something to do with the yellow box formatting business. Nick, I think that's yours.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at it.
Okay. And by the way, Nick, on the business about synchronous that synchronous cache, yeah, synchronous prefetching. Are you on that, or do we need to talk about that more?
I'm looking at it. We had some conversation at some point back where we were looking at, how that relates to the general sort of notion of the new compiler in terms of recognizing inefficient code paths and how they would be addressed in the language in general. But I think
but that's a bigger story. I mean, the story right now is you're just doing something which needs a lot of entities. You've already got 5 of them. You've got 50 to go. We need to actually do the prefetch at that point.
Right. In the case you give is a good example where it takes 2 minutes to do one at a time, and it takes 2 seconds to grab all of them. So
right.
If we recognize that case readily, there's going to be some heuristics in terms of fine-tuning the behavior, but
right. But structurally, you can do that. You can just pause the computation, do a synchronous prefetch, and then keep going. Yes.
Yes, we can do that. We just need to sort out the exact parameters that trigger that, which is the same thing we did with prefetching. There's a little bit of fiddling, but we'll take a look at it. We'll
and the yellow box formatting stuff, is that, have you straightened that out now or not?
Yeah, we had a discussion with Jeremy, Tony, and Lou about it, and they're, the cases that Bob was looking at where there were really bad timings were kind of a worst case scenario where basically the entire cache had been blown away, and even though the client had the information needed typeset, it was making some metadata calls, and we're factoring those out now.
Okay. Is this stuff Packlet updatable?
Yeah, it is all Packlet updatable.
Great.
So
okay.
If we get it buttoned up and tested well, we can roll it out.
Okay, terrific. Okay, let's go back to this name. As it's kind of awkward. I mean, it'd be nice to say something like option uses. That's kind of weird as well. Option using symbol, that's terrible. Well, I would say, look, I think symbols with option. Anybody got a better suggestion?
Option symbols would be kind of proper, but difficult to understand. But I guess once you know it.
I think option symbols is incomprehensible. Largely incomprehensible. I mean, you have to know it's as an option. Okay, what is the full statement here? The full statement is symbols that use this symbol as an option.
Mhm.
Included option? Maybe along the lines of our contains function, contains option.
Well, what about using as option? Okay, is symbols using as option comprehensible? I think yes. Absolute silence.
I'm trying to think whether it's possible to read in which direction it goes.
I understand. On the live stream, Michael Hale is pointing out that the yellow boxes are particularly, that he's noticed the yellow boxes are particularly slow when it's a long list and it's producing a shortened form of output to display. That's actually an interesting case, Nick. Does it go and fetch those things before it does the shortening?
Yeah, it does because of the way that shorten happens to work. We've put in optimization for long lists where instead of fetching them one by one, we fetch them efficiently.
Wouldn't it be nice to not fetch them if it's shortening?
Yeah, I've talked with Itai about that a little bit, and there's some modernization people would like to do in terms of the way that short works, but it is in a field that I'm not at all familiar with, and it's a more general problem than just with entities, because there are problems, for example, with any template boxes, the shortened code doesn't actually know how big they are. So sometimes you can get a shortened list that it actually is way longer than it should be because it treats each box as being only a single character, even though they could be, 40 characters long.
I see. But so that does seem like something that's important to look at. I mean, the issue is, can we make the formatting stuff be lazy? For example, in the case of I don't know exactly at what point in the code, how does that code path work with respect to whether the front end is requesting stuff or whether we're pushing stuff out? Anyway, I don't know, but thanks, Michael Hale, for the comment about that. That's a good thing to be paying attention to. All right, back to this. Symbols, okay.
Something like used as option? Sounds like an attribute, like a Boolean, but
okay. Sander on the live stream is saying general criteria for filtering would be nice, like in component measurements. I'm not quite sure what else. Right. I mean, it would be a pure function that can tell one, get those things which have attributes, hold and hold first and so on. But, by the time you're doing that, you might as well be just going ahead and just doing it yourself, so to speak.
Or using the implicit entity language, which is what I had above. So this is powerful. It's just that it's a bit long to write when you want something simple. In this case.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so just a minute. Let's go down here. Gosh, what do we want here? So symbols that use this symbol as an option. I think symbols using as an option. Symbols using as an option. It's the best I can do right now. If we have no further other suggestions, I suggest we implement this
okay.
That name. Symbols using as attribute. It's a little more obscure for attributes. I think it's comprehensible. It's not great. All right, let's move on. I think that'll. Okay. Should level get an L value? My gosh.
Okay,
that's
so
complicated. Yep.
Yes, so this is one of these cases in which I I try to propose an alternative. So that's why it's a bit longer. So I don't think we should do anything special for level. Mainly because level returns a flat list of things and you are not sure where they were. So it's, and I think we can do something more general with a function called reset part, which would follow replace part, that would allow specifying, like replace part itself does, where do you want to change things. And perhaps we can introduce, if this is really needed, a symbolic version of the list of positions at a given level.
I understand. So the issue is replace part is perfectly happy to have. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So we've got replace part of an expression. Let's have a random expression here. I don't know. You've got a little expression here. So you're saying replace part in this 2, 1 arrow y y y. I don't know, where was 2, 1? Didn't it have a 2, 1?
1, 2.
Okay, fine. All right. So now the question is, and we can also say 1, blank, presumably arrow y y y.
Right. Or you can have a list of positions.
Right. Right. So the question is, what you're saying is a level is those parts which have a certain number of, I mean, why isn't a level? I don't understand why saying level 2, why replace on level 2 isn't just that.
Well, because precisely here, Carlo is talking about a negative level, which is something that counts from.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is very obscure. Okay, so the question is, so what is a negative level? A negative level is something whose part specification okay, so a positive level is something where you're walking down the tree and every element of the index list takes you on the specified branch as you go down the tree. There isn't a negative part specification. There is only a negative level, as in recurse to the bottom of the tree and start going up from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
The most interesting case being parts that are at the, at the bottom of the tree, so to speak, leaves of the tree. I have to say, I think, our new tree manipulation stuff seems like the best place to think about these kinds of things. If you're really that keen to replace the leaves of a thing, I think this is really a weird case, but if you're really that keen to replace the leaves, turn the expression into a tree and then go to town and do whatever tree manipulation you want. And then turn it back to an expression. That's what I think.
Okay.
By the way, when are we next looking at the trees stuff?
When Xavier is back.
Oh, okay.
He has taken some time recently.
Okay. I mean, what's the timescale? Like a week or so?
Yes, I think 1-2 weeks at most.
Okay. All right. So I think there's nothing more to do on this.
Okay.
Except I think we should be thinking about examples of the tree stuff that involve that kind of global expression replacement.
Mm-hmm.
All right, position patterns.
Yes, so this is a continuation of our discussion last week, in which you suggested to explore the possibility of having patterns specifying lists or collections of positions, like we do in replace part.
Okay.
So in this case, for example, we can use that pattern, I prime q, to replace the diagonal elements, some diagonal elements in a matrix. So the question is whether we can extend something like that to, say, extract.
And why wouldn't we do that?
Well, I was thinking that the nice thing of replace part is that it has the patterns inside a rule. So from the scoping point of view, it looks nice.
Yeah.
But if we put it, and in fact, I have that comment there that replace part until version 6 or so had this alternative notation in which there were arguments rather than rules.
Yep.
And that didn't accept patterns. And I think precisely because of that reason, you couldn't put two different eyes in different arguments because they wouldn't be properly scoped.
Sure. But isn't this the situation with cases without a right-hand side? Right? I mean, the extract thing is like a cases.
Well, the point is that in cases, we have a pattern for the thing we are extracting, not for the position we are extracting at.
No, I understand that. This is a new use of patterns for the position. Now clearly it doesn't. What happens if you patternize the keys in an association? In other words, let's imagine we're doing this, because this should work also for associations, shouldn't it? Okay, look, clearly we could have a potential syntax extension using patterns for, I mean, there's 2 points here. First of all, in some complicated cases, like, for example, XML trees, where we've always had a hard time actually having a good notation for kind of the index path down an XML tree. Now, that may change with the tree stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, okay, so I don't quite understand the objection here. So what's the problem here? So if I say...
The objection is basically that I don't think we have a precedent for this. So this would be an extension to something that we don't do yet. So I want to make sure that...
Okay, so you're saying that we're introducing variables here that are, for example, those names, I blank and I blank.
Mm-hmm.
The name I mean, we could make this a scoping construct with respect to that second argument. I don't think that's problematic, and make it, because normally that second argument will be a literal, right? So this is the only case of non-literals that we're dealing with there. I mean, do you agree that this case, if I say that table, okay, so let's look at that table, to get the diagonal of that table,
mm-hmm.
Okay, that if I said extract, I mean, could we even imagine this working? Well, could we imagine?
No.
Is this crazy?
I think the part language is a lot more strict. The position language can be extended, but the part language, no. I don't think we can do that.
Why? What's the
I'm not sure how to explain. It's like the patterns. We can think that the patterns in the position language represent a list of the matched patterns. In part, is because it works by slices. So part doesn't try to connect one level to the other level.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it's difficult to replace I by something unique that represents that.
Yeah, I understand. Because part of the point you're making there is that this is equivalent to I blank, and that then is going to get really crazy. Because how does it know at those different levels in essentially that sub-value structure that those two I's are the same thing?
I think what I'm saying is that right now, with our part language, we cannot extract a diagonal, no matter what we do. And so converting these into something that currently works would be difficult.
Yeah, I understand. It's also an L value, which makes it even more complicated. All right, but let's look at extract for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so clearly replace part knows where those parts are.
Yeah.
Where those pattern parts are.
Yeah.
Right? So could we, I see, but it is replacing them back into the structure of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in principle, somewhat bizarrely, we could write this as a piece of code that says that, and we could throw a bunch of things out that are the extracted things and catch them, and we get this result, right?
Mm-hmm. Interestingly, in replace part, once we have identified the I, we can replace by something that depends on I, but it's not so easy to replace by something that depends on the actual thing that was there. We don't have a notation for that.
Yeah, well, I know that's map at, basically. I mean, that raises the question of whether map at should take patterns, which seems to me quite sensible and quite interesting with respect to the thing we were just discussing about level specs. Because if map at took patterns, one could imagine something where the pattern, where the index pattern, so to speak, said, well, what will be level -1 in index patterns? Wow, that's kind of an exotic thing. It's some kind of longest of blanks or something. What is it?
Sorry, what do you want to do?
I'm trying to make the index pattern for level -1 for the leaves of the tree. By the way, if we talk about doing this in extract, we absolutely should talk about doing this in map at. Right? Are there any other places where we should be looking at this?
Yes. So the collections is extract, map at, insert, delete.
What about flatten at?
As well. Yeah. Yeah.
What does insert look like for this purpose?
Well, it will be something that is inserted.
So, for example, I mean, this would not be a crazy thing. If I said insert in my list here, something like blank question mark even q, comma, X or something, that would be pretty cool. That would be a riffle. That's nice. All right. So, okay, so the objection is the scoping of named pattern variables. Is that right? I mean, other than that, is there any known objection?
No, I mean, I think this can work. It's simply something we have never done before, and I just want to make sure that, because it's going to take some work to introduce
no, I understand.
this type of new idea.
I mean, map at would be a nice one to have, I would think. I mean, because this basically, is it right that would say map at level 2? Is that right? Yeah, I think so. That would mean map at level 2. That's equivalent to map f expa actually at level 2.
Yeah, I think so.
It's nice. It's very nice. I think this is a nice thing. Let's try and make it work. And in terms of the scoping of these variables, I think these things can be scoping constructs with respect to that argument. I don't see a huge problem with that. I mean, your concern is that variable is sort of localized to the index matching and does not connect to any kind of variable in the actual expression, right?
Yes, it's just yes. We don't have there something that we typically use patterns on. While if the thing is a rule, like in replace part, then it's natural to put patterns. That was my only objection. So that's why I was suggesting perhaps if we force the use of a rule in extract, then we are more motivated to have patterns. But then I don't know what to put on the right-hand side.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I missed something there. What?
Yes, I was thinking if to use patterns, we force having a rule in the second argument of extract so that we kind of know we are going to put their patterns, then I don't know what to put on the right-hand side.
No, I don't see there's anything to put on the right-hand side. It doesn't have a right-hand side. Just like in, I mean, okay, so the question is, look, I mean, cases is a perfectly good example of where it doesn't need to have something on the right-hand side of the pattern.
It doesn't need, but it can have.
I understand that. I understand that. So you're asking, is there any meaning to putting something on the right-hand side of a rule there with a pattern?
Right.
I don't see it, because you're not returning. I mean, look, there's something utterly exotic you can put there, which is some kind of function to apply to that part. But I think that's just exotic and pointless.
Right. It would be like this extraction version of replace part.
Yes. Or alternatively, it would be like a map-at.
Well, map-at would leave all the rest, while extract would only extract and apply to those.
Yeah, okay. I mean, look, clearly extract having a third argument of hold, which it does, you could imagine doing something exotic with that.
Mhm.
But I think let's not worry about it. I don't see a value to that.
Right.
But I think this is really nice, having pattern. I mean, this is something we've sort of been circling around for probably 15 years of having,
Mhm.
full support for pattern,
Mhm.
pattern indices.
Mhm.
That's good.
Okay.
All right. Let us go on, since we have some time left here. Oh, a little bit of time. I was going to go through some of the low-hanging items. Does anybody, so the array association thing, do we need to talk about that here?
No, I don't think so. That's on my plate.
Okay.
I will try to have it on the agenda next week.
Okay, great. Who is dealing with the chat functionality, function support?
Brady, Andre.
Okay, are they going to meet at some point soon?
Yes, that was something Brady told me. I will check again.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, let's see. And I guess on this list, external value is something that Garrett is dealing with. Is that right?
Yes, and it's part of CSE.
Okay. Anything happen with find character encoding?
EA is working on it, and I've been checking with her.
Does it seem to be converging?
I remember she said it is a little complicated than she thought it is. So maybe I will ask her to
use machine learning to be able to find out for a given piece of text, to be able to guess what character encoding it's using. Not a given piece of text, rather a given byte array, figure out what is it. And by the way, is she aware of the fact that we're going to to non-plane zero Unicode? Right, because that's another possible. If you're fed a piece of a byte array, one thing it could represent is a bunch of random emoji and things. Am I making sense? Sushma, did you understand
Yeah,
that?
I understood. I'm not sure if she's aware of it, but I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What has happened to the column map functions and so on? Are those being worked on?
Yes, that's also for me. Yes, let's discuss it in the next agenda as well.
Okay. Flattened.
Again, I need the type for that. He had some valid concerns, and I don't remember, but we need to have him in one of these meetings, or perhaps we can discuss in SEC with him.
Okay. Did we ever? Let's see. Things like whatever happened to integer fractional part?
Oh, I think it's just that we thought we have more important things to do, but we can work on that as well. At some point, we were very interested in these pair functions.
Yes.
And that's why we introduced some of these. But yeah, this should be fairly easy to do.
We should, Sushma, are you going to go through and sort these things into let's see.
Prioritize them.
What's that?
Do you mean I should prioritize them? Or...
Well, yeah, because I mean they're not noted into whether they've been green lighted or not.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Please just note in the list. I mean, we've got a whole list here. Let's note whether they've been green lighted.
Okay. Yeah.
And also note who is working on them, if
Which
anybody.
team? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Because we've also got here. When are we going to talk about around? Is it still called around, or is it called about?
No, it's around. At the moment, it's around. We can change it if you want, but
well, I think we spent a lot of time thinking about around. So, what is the state of it?
It's well, it's just that I haven't worked on it for some time, but yeah, it's planned for 12, and so let's meet about it soon.
Okay.
I just have to retake the project.
Okay. All right. Who else is working on that?
Nobody. I think it's just me.
Oh, okay. Fine. All right. And by the way, Nick, when are we going to see more of the time and date stuff?
So we've been working, Roger is interested, and Jose and I have been looking with some of the group pretty intently at the temporal data, or not, temporal logic, and how that interfaces with the language. I don't know, Jose, we probably still need a little bit of fleshing out before we have a...
Yes, this is a large area, and we have some basic design of the operators we need, like until, next, etc. But we need to work on applications to make sure that we understand all that's needed here. And something good is that we have found that the Lean developers are also working on that, so they may have support for the computational part of it, which will be great for us.
That would be nice. So we can prove theorems about temporal situations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Okay. And okay, just looking down our list here. Whatever happened to faded form? The effort to have the thing that we do often in blog posts, where we will have a display of some output and it fades out after some at some point. Sushma, what happened to that?
I remember I sent this to front end, and they discussed this in user assistance, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure what did you guys decide.
Well, I'm sure that they rejected it there, but I mean, I think that it is not something that's worth doing. Look, it's something we clearly have code for. I mean, maybe it's something for the function repository for right now.
I see.
Maybe that's the right place for it. Let's get the code we have right now that already exists, that does things like producing outputs that show little tear marks at the bottom and so on, and let's get that ready for the function repository. But you should note that in this master list here.
Yeah, I have that master list. I will write it down.
Okay. I have a note here that parent directory with multiple level parent directory has been implemented. Is that correct?
Yes. Is that for the second argument? That is.
Yeah, level is the second argument.
Yeah, that is done.
Okay. What was this graph sources, graph sinks? Did that ever happen?
No, I don't see that happen. I sent that to Charles. That is the last update I had.
Okay, well, we need to find out from Charles what the story is.
Yes.
Do you have any idea? I know it's the wrong group of people here, but array plot 3D. That's a shoddy story.
I don't know what the current status of that is, though.
Okay.
I will check.
Please. Okay, I'm just looking down my list here. This whole there's an effort. Yeah, there's a bunch of things here that I don't think are relevant to this meeting. The business with hashing for key derivation functions like HMAC, that is being done, right? Or already got done. Any idea?
I know nothing about that project.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think, Sushma, we better go through this long list at some point and try and clean up where each of these things is supposed to go.
Yes.
Whatever happened to hexagonal array plot?
That's in Xavier's and Brett's list.
Okay.
Yes.
Whatever happened to the combinator evaluate craziness? That was something that Todd had worked on with somebody in our mentorship program. And I know that produced code. I suspect nowadays that should go to the function repository. Maybe you can find that.
Okay, I can do that.
I'd be interested in looking at that code.
Okay. I mean, I think it was fairly extensive code. I think the main issue is the naming of combinators and the fact that things that would otherwise be K of S or whatever become combinator K, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was a print form that looked fairly nice. I mean, combinators have been obscure for about 100 years. Gosh, it's coming up for the 100th anniversary of combinators. We should celebrate that. Should remember that actually.
Yeah, we have a ticket for it and we have all the information there. I think I should just push it forward and I will send it to you as a to look at it.
Okay.
I remember working on an example in the curry page on combinators.
Right. What's the story with these functions, this geometric sequence, arithmetic sequence? Are we doing these? Are we not doing these? Do we think they're unnecessary?
So last time you asked me to check with Roger if they're something we want to do, and he wasn't very thrilled about it. So
great.
He said it is too simple.
That is a ridiculous response. Gosh. Okay. It's like we have polygons of arbitrary numbers of vertices, but we don't have triangles. I don't think that's a good response. If necessary, why don't you what aspect? Okay, why don't we talk about that and some other related things and get Roger in a meeting, in one of these ILD meetings, to talk about this?
Okay, what he said was it is very trivial with table to give you more information.
Yes, of course it is. But it's still a useful way to package. And I would think there are things that can be done. Yeah, I think it's a useful way to. Well, okay, let's get Roger in one of these meetings to talk about this. Whatever happened to complex plot? Another thing that is also trivial to do, in quotes.
That was in Brett's to-do list. I think it is stalled for now, but I wouldn't. I will check with him before I say anything else. It was an intern project, and it's not complete.
Okay.
The last time I checked.
Okay. So what do these say? Update pending. This is from a long time ago.
Yes, that is. When I and Ares were looking at all the talking to people about their updates, and we didn't really collect updates for those. But I think I have to go back through this entire list and find all the updates.
Okay. Okay. I think there's a lot of stuff here that may have gotten dropped. Whatever happened to text trim? That seemed like a useful function. Well, it's a little unfair. We're diving into this list without warning, and I'm off agenda here, so I suppose we should perhaps we should wrap it up for now here. I think the main message here, gosh, there's a lot of stuff here where it's like design is complete, like rule space data and so on. Key press pane. You know anything about these? Okay, great. Well, thanks to everybody on the oh yeah, someone on the Vejero on our live stream is asking, on the subject of complex plot, how about a complex map function similar to what Wolfram Alpha does? Yeah, actually, I'd be interested to hear what Jose and others would say about that. That's a conformal mapping story. What is the story with that?
It's a bit like map projections. So yeah, it's starting with a grid in some space, projecting it and getting the grid. What we do with GeoGrid lines, things like that.
That's pretty weird what this did. How do I get one of these complex maps?
I don't know how to do it.
Let's see. Does this oh, there we go.
Yeah,
complex
exactly.
map. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, okay, just to take a minute here. We are a little over time, but take a minute here. Just talk about what. That's a very ugly bitmap. I guess that's what we get for not doing the official download here. But in any case, how would we represent that? What is that?
Well, it's a function. What you wrote there is a function of a complex variable, or in general, if we want to do the R2 to R2 case, it would be a general function from 2 coordinates to 2 coordinates, which is what we do with projections.
But so explain that to me. I mean, so if I say if I'm saying geographics.
Do geographics, background none, and GeoGrid lines automatic, and then choose a projection.
Well, okay, but I mean, let me do it on the Earth, okay?
Yeah.
GeoGrid lines to automatic,
yeah,
GeoProjection, arrow.
Albers, whatever. Yeah, so
okay.
that grid there is that mapping.
I understand. Looks like an airfoil.
Right. So, yeah, so there are more properties that you can obtain from them. And some of the projections are conformal. So if you do GeoProjection data string conformal, you get a list of our conformal projections, which are projections that preserve angles.
By the way, why didn't that autocomplete? That seems to be an completion bug.
Yes, because this is a class, not a projection. So
but it should still, that's a bug in the auto-completion system.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
but I mean, these are very specific. Each one of these could be defined by a function, right? How would I give a function here instead of giving like albers? I mean, albers must be at some level of function. Oh, that's a wild one. Okay.
Yes. Internally, they all go to functions that we compile, etc. So we don't have a way exposed to allow the users to specify their own functions, but we could. The main obstacle is this issue of do we ask them to write degrees or radians, lat lon or lon lat, this sort of thing.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but I mean, in this case here, mapping R2 to R2, what you're saying there, okay, so what one could imagine, I'm a little confused here because, I mean, isn't it image, what is the image transformation, right? Is something very much like that. Isn't that mapping R2 to R2?
This is also mapping of R2 to R2, yeah.
What is it doing exactly? It's taking, for a given image, right? So if I have an image of the Earth, just to be clear, and what is so let's say I say geographics.
In this case, it would be better geoimage because you want an image.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so if I do that, then I'll get some funky image of the Earth. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what, for example, if I want to do a Mercator projection, no, if I want, do you know a projection? Do you know one of the projections? If I just have the identity here, that will show me whatever the raw geo image is.
Right.
Which is some kind of equi-rectangular projection or something?
Well, by default, your image chooses Mercator. So this is a Mercator projection.
Okay. Has an awful lot of Antarctica there.
Yes, the poles are expanded by the Mercator projection. That's
to infinity.
Why. Exactly, yes. We are cutting at 85 degrees, like everybody does, to make the map square.
Okay. All right. So what will be an example of a projection that is a sensible projection here that I could use?
Well, the formulas, I don't know, try, I don't even remember the notation in
Isn't
here.
it arc? Isn't Mercator some kind of arc hyperbolic cosecant or something?
Yes, there is a logarithm. I mean, the longitude is preserved, the latitude is expanded. There are several formulas, but one of them is
Yeah, okay, but I mean, but if I were to do this here, what does this take as pixel position P corresponds to f of P? So for example, if I were to just say square root here, then it would do that.
Right.
That's a cool example, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Should put that into the image transformation examples. Can somebody, Sushma, could you do that?
Yes.
Okay, so but the basic point here is this is doing a transformation. If we were to put grid lines on here, this is doing the kind of transformation we're talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So were we to take a grid, I don't know how to make a grid. Actually, that's another thing that we don't have. It's something that makes an image that is a grid. It's kind of a funky thing. That's it. Could you suggest that, Sushma, to Shadi?
I'll do.
But in any case, I mean, we can clearly synthesize one. But the question is, other than for visualization, for example, this complex map visualization, what would we do here? Are we going to see that's the thing that's kind of confusing to me. Yeah, I mean, so the way it would look, it might be some complex map plot, and what it is it's like a parametric function. What the heck is it? I mean, one thing that's very weird here is this is a map. This is a plot of a space. It's a representation of a space with nothing in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say we could use complex notation, and we have a complex function there, and then comma C from a complex number to another complex number, and they represent
yeah, I understand, but it's going to be the pure grid lines, right? I mean, because the other thing you could do is have, as you say here, a picture of the world, so to speak, which is then transformed in a projection, right? But this thing here is the pure projection part of it.
Yeah.
All right. Sushma, let's add this to, I mean, when we talk about complex plot, we should also talk about this.
Okay.
Okay, we should wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, and everyone on the live stream. Yes, someone is pointing out that if one could do it for the complex map case, it would be nice to see the transformation from a 2x2 matrix, for example. I mean, look, the basic class of things that we don't really have are a representation of the transformation on a space. We are used to transforming things that have content, like an image, for example, not a representation purely of the transformation of a space.
Well, we have geometric transformation, but it's restricted to this class of linear fractional functions.
No, I understand that, but the point is that what we don't have from a graphics point of view is a representation of what happened to an empty space, otherwise known as what happened to the grid lines, for example. Right? I mean, all of our plotting functions plot something. I suppose that one example that doesn't, okay? So if I take graphics, what happens if I say graphics, and then I say, I'm plotting nothing, and I'm saying, let's say plot range like 0 to 10. Plot range, I don't think if I can just say 10, and then I say grid lines, arrow automatic. Okay, that's though 50 or something here. And now, that's curious, the grid line, we didn't end up with more grid lines, but now what happens if we say scaling function? Does that do anything? Does that make any sense? No, graphics doesn't take scaling functions.
Yeah. Well, this is, we would end up with the same problem of geographics that has to distinguish grid lines from geogrid lines, which are the projected and unprojected. So I can imagine that grid lines are always in the projected space, so they are going to be also equispaced. So you can also have in geographics both grid lines and geogrid lines simultaneously.
Yeah, I understand. For the projected and unprojected cases.
Exactly, yeah.
Boy,
in geo, this is called the graticule.
Live stream was mentioning something about a linear algebra intern position about working on linear transformations. Well, maybe somebody is already on top of this and we don't know it. Fair enough. Okay, let's wrap up this meeting. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you all soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.